talked about it in letters, and we've talked about it on the phone. But how you really feel about it, I don't really know.
What's your take on Cassavetes? 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 Misogynist, genius. Misogynist, genius. Misogynist, genius. Misogynist, genius. What's your take on Cassavetes? What's your take on Cassavetes?
Welcome to There's Sometimes a Buggy, Irresponsible Opinions About Classic Film. I'm Elise.
I'm Dave. This week, it's part 2 of our Oeuvre-View on Setsuko Hara. We're going to be talking about A Ball at the Anjo House and Woman in the Typhoon Area.
Sure, there's different ways that that's been translated, but that's one of them. That's more or less it.
That's the gist.
Yeah, exactly.
So, what's the program for us today, Elise?
Well, I have been doing a lot of recent and quick, as usual, but more substantial than Wikipedia for once.
Good.
Reading about Setsuko Hara, and I thought we could maybe set the stage that way and go a little more in depth about her persona and her cultural reception.
That sounds fantastic. Lead on.
So, thing about Setsuko Hara, Dave, is you definitely chose this one, although I was very agreeable to doing her. You seem to be more excited about her as an actress. Not really as an actress, but I guess as a screen personality than I am. I find her persona very, very interesting, and obviously I love the Ozu films that she's in, and she's very much a part of those films, very central to them.
Yes.
I also like the Ozu films she's not in, too, though.
Well, that's true.
I don't feel like I'm responding to her to the same degree that you are. So why don't you talk a little bit to begin with about what you like in her persona?
Well, it's true that our first encounters with her are through the Ozu films, and that is not the be-all and end-all of her screen presence, as we've discovered today, certainly. There are a lot of different other facets to her. We knew that intellectually already. We've seen it in some other films, but here we've really seen some radical departures, even before she gets to Ozu. To sum it up really succinctly, I'm impressed by her negative capability.
You might have to expand on that for our listeners who aren't familiar with that term, and even for those who are, how that could apply to an actor's screen persona.
So it's a term from Keats. He introduced it in a letter where he talked about Shakespeare, what he appreciated in Shakespeare, but he was talking about what he appreciated in himself.
Yeah.
Which is what all criticism, good criticism, should be. It is a capacity for remaining in uncertainty, brimming with life force without going in any particular direction.
Okay.
That's kind of how I see it. I don't know if you like that description.
It's pretty abstract.
I think it also describes a lot of the Setsuko Hara performances. We feel so connected and close to her, even though we don't really understand exactly what her motivations are quite often.
So she's enigmatic?
Mona Lisa-like. A lot of these terms are kind of hackneyed, but they have been thrown out in connection with her over the years. She's also just an incredibly attractive and appealing performer, which you can't discount when you're talking about
movie stars? No.
Yeah. So I'm not going to say that's not part of it.
The thing about Setsuko Hara, as I started to say, is that you could take her screen persona as being sort of old-fashioned, or if not quite that, then at least problematic in terms of women's possibilities. So she often doesn't have a romantic partner, but only because she's defined in terms of her relationship to her family, usually her father. She is very, 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 very repressed and has often internalized. Talk about her typical screen persona. There's obviously a lot of variety, but her typical screen persona in mostly the Ozu films, but to some extent the Neruda films as well. She was called the Eternal Virgin.
Yeah.
That's because she isn't really thought of in terms of having a romantic partner.
By choice. She's a Volcel.
And she seems to have internalized a lot of the expectations in the three Noriko characters. Seems to have internalized her society's expectations of of women to such a degree that even when the people around her who are closest to her are saying, you don't have to do this, you don't have to make these sacrifices and be this way, she still feels that she does, and will even fight them over it.
Yeah.
And that is fascinating, but it's very problematic.
Yeah, of course. It's not a guide to life.
But this is the way I've been thinking about her. I mean, I also really adore Henry James' characters. We brought Henry James up in connection with everything, but also Setsuko Hara. Both his male and his female protagonists are like that. And that's kind of an internal struggle in me that, on the one hand, I love his work and his characters, and on the other hand, they're so frustrated. Although, all the characters in 19th century literature are pretty much frustrated. But again, with Henry James, they've internalized that more. It's not like they're fighting society. It's like it's been completely internalized.
Yeah.
These restrictions. Absolutely, the two great Henry James heroines based on his cousin Minnie Temple, who died young, Isabel Archer and Millie Teal, are both, if you want to talk in terms of negative capability in literary characters, those would be the two prime examples you'd probably go to. In fact, they're both defined. Both of them are defined in terms of potential that never gets used.
That's true.
In the one case because of death, but potential that also becomes infinite precisely because it never gets used. A promise that remains a promise.
Yeah.
Because there's no way to fulfill it.
Always at that protean stage.
Which is exactly what Keith's talking about.
When we started watching the Ozu films with her, I was writing a novel, and I actually did picture her starring in the novel as my character.
Oh, really? So that's how I've been thinking about Setsuko Hara, and clearly you have been thinking about her in the same way, or not. I can't get inside you and find out if you're actually responding to her more on the screen than I am, but clearly we're thinking about her in the same terms.
They'd have to...
I just feel more analytical about it. I don't know why, because you were just very analytical about it, so maybe I'm wrong about that.
I think you're wrong.
Just tell me I'm wrong. What's interesting to me is then looking at a couple of articles here that show me what the reception of Setsuko Hara has been like in Japan. Like, it's pretty clear to me that Japanese cinema, post-war Japanese cinema, has been received in a very particular way, mainly through this critic, as I only found out today, but I think we have looked this up before, but through this particular critic, Donald Ritchie.
Yes.
That is how we got the American Japanese canon that we have.
He did some valuable work, but then again, we have no idea what things he left out because of his own idiosyncrasies.
His own taste. Yeah. And also maybe what was popular at the particular time that he was doing this, what was valued at that time of the cinematic canon. Like, who knows what all went into this. We haven't even read his work.
No.
So we can't even comment. But just to be aware that canons are always artificially constructed. And when you're talking about cross-cultural reception, maybe that's particularly evident.
I would think so, because we're not reading all of the Japanese criticism from the 50s and 60s that was presumably being done in newspapers and periodicals. Who knows what they were saying about the movies of the Golden Age?
My impression is that American or North American fans of this particular Japanese post-war canon really adore and worship, male fans adore and worship Setsuko Hara. That's very common.
I guess
so it's interesting. No, I've encountered it a lot online. And it's interesting then to find out more about exactly how she was received in Japan by men and women. And that's where I found just a couple of things on the internet. So
bring it on.
One of them, I have encountered this before when searching for articles on her. This is an article that appeared in Japan Times by, I'm going to murder this name, I'm sure, Kaori Shoji, talking about Setsuko Hara's death at 95 years old in September 2016. Basically being very dismissive and saying modern Japanese women can't stand Setsuko Hara and she represents something that we're trying to get away from.
Wow.
Of course, who knows how representative this woman's view is, because it kind of sounds like Molly Haskell and Jennifer Jones being like, all women hated Jennifer Jones, by which she means myself and the two friends that I asked. This is all we got to go on.
Were they people who had even seen the movies, or did they just grow up hearing, why can't you be a good daughter like Setsuko Hara,
why can't you be an eternal virgin?
Yeah, not knowing that those movies do not present a normal, just dutiful, well-behaved daughter. She is so exponentially transformed from that state because of her interrogation and extension of those kinds of canons of behavior that she constitutes a walking critique in herself.
Anyway, for this particular woman, writing in 2016, Setsuko Hara evoked evokes a traditional form of Japanese womanhood that we want to get away from, that is obedient and repressed and all of the rest of that. But what's interesting then is what I came across next, which is it looks like some kind of thesis. Oh, well, it's published in the Frames Cinema Journal.
Okay.
By Jennifer Coates, called Setsuko Hara versus the Press, the Post-War Trolling of a Wartime Icon. And she has done a lot of looking at the reception of Setsuko Hara as a star in this period that we have just started looking at with her films now, which is in the immediate post-war period.
That sounds amazing.
And Jennifer Coates, and I read this whole thing, it's a fairly substantial article. So she's looking at the occupation era, more specifically the years 1945 to 1948, which she says are in many ways the peak period of Hara's unpopularity.
Well, that makes sense, right?
Driven as well as documented by the lowbrow gossip press that scholars tend to avoid in favor of more academic titles. So she's looking at the gossip press as well as other sources. She seems to also have done some studying of the public reception of the films, but is more focused on critics, and says that male critics during this period well, I mean, they would almost all be male critics, wouldn't they? Are very, very ambivalent about Setsuko Hara. So she's looking at the transition of her as a star from, I mean, think about the period of Japanese cinema that her career spans, quite unlike anything we've seen even in Hollywood, even with silent stars, or pre-depression and post-depression stars, which usually were the silent stars, right?
Yeah.
But here we're looking at a star persona that was constructed during wartime, which was very, cheerfully pro-military and into the whole frontier adventure of colonization of Manchuria, right? And so this whole persona during the occupation, the American occupation, had to be reconstructed. But again, the fact of the occupation, as we've actually talked about in the last episode, itself just highlights that all cultural situations are artificial, right? It's not just, Japan was forced to feel, well, it is Japan was forced to feel one way during the war and then forced to feel another way. There's no natural feeling flowing from the people of the country toward their cultural constructs.
No,
it's always an artificially constructed situation.
There's no non-ideological center.
Exactly, that's what I'm struggling to say. And during this period, which is before she started doing her ozus, as we've already seen, there are a lot of different Setsuko Haras presented, and she is associated at this time by these male critics, not with being a very good traditional Japanese woman, but with being quite the opposite of that. Coates' thesis, or one of her theses here in this article, seems to be that their resentment of the occupation is to some extent being projected onto Setsuko Hara, who they feel is being presented in a very westernized way during this period. And so films like No Regrets for Our Youth, well, obviously that would be a prime example.
Yeah.
She's talked about as being cold and intellectual and having a too Western style of beauty and all these sorts of things. Funnily enough, Coates finds a interview in a fanzine, and I think we've mentioned before what an enormous fanzine culture Japan had.
And the United States.
Yeah, just like the United States. So this is an interview published in Film Fan, is a translation magazine, in February 1949, where two people called Woman and Man are having an argument about Setsuko Hara, in which it's the woman who likes Setsuko Hara, contrary to 2016 poll that was taken. So the man is finding fault with Setsuko Hara's appearance. So the woman thinks she is a perfect example of natural female beauty, but the man disagrees, citing Hera's intellectual and distant persona as the problem. But the woman thinks he is finding fault with Hara in comparison to Western female stars. Anyway, so her example of the Western female star that the man probably wishes that Setsuko Hara looked like is Betty Davis.
Okay.
So who knows about cross-cultural reception of film stars? Apparently in 1949, the ideal Hollywood star, according to Japanese male taste, was Betty Davis? Like, who knew?
Very odd.
And wouldn't Betty Davis be? Well, she's not cold and intellectual and distant, that's for sure.
A body with a voice.
But wouldn't she be very much a modern and aggressive and masculine style of woman?
It
All I'm
depends
saying is...
which Betty Davis movies they'd seen.
All I'm saying is, there is a lot going on in Setsuko Hara's persona, and depending at what cultural moment you are, and who you are, in terms of gender, in terms of nationality, whether you're the home nation or not, it can be seen through through a lot of different lenses and turn into a lot of different things.
I would say so.
And one of the things she does mention in this article, which continues in Setsuko Hara's persona into the Ozu era, is first of all the aloofness, her aloof quality, and the fact that she doesn't have a romantic partner being problematic about her in terms of thinking her as a perfect and untroubling traditional Japanese woman.
Yeah, I would think so. She's a very unsettling force.
Yeah, so there you go. I just wanted to talk about what kind of the parameters of the persona are, what some of the gender difficulties of that are, and also how many different ways it is possible and has been possible to see her.
And in some ways it is a shame that we were only able to watch one of the war-era propaganda films. I guess we can take it on faith that the others were just as flag-wavy, or even more so, once the war even stepped up and involved the United States as well. And it was going on for 8 years. So all those movies, no subtitles for them. So
shall we then get into our actual movies? Starting with The Ball at Anjo House.
Also, Ball at the Anjo Mansion. That's the way the subtitles rendered it on the copy that we watched today.
Now, I found another interesting resource here called Japan on Film. It's a blog by a person who protests that they do not know Japanese. They are American. They're just big fans of these films and have watched a bunch of them and done relevant research and are blogging about them.
What's the person's name?
They don't seem to have their name anywhere on their site.
An anonymous blogger on Japanese films.
That's right, but a very good resource because, like I said, this person has seen more than we have.
Good.
And has done some relevant research where possible. And I like the write-up on this one because I was trying to get more oriented in terms of what exactly has happened to this family in this movie.
Well, that I could probably help with too, but you've got it from the blog, so let's hear how it's been succinctly conveyed.
Well, obviously, so this is a post-war film dealing with the immediate post-war situation.
The structure of Japanese society is radically changed after the old order has completely fucked up and lost a war.
Yeah, I didn't realize that this was somehow the aristocracy was... Okay, so we start out with, in this film, we've got this family, the Anjo House, and they have lost all of their money, and they have to sell their mansion.
Right, because there are now massive property taxes for the first time being
our blogger mentions.
Levied upon the aristocrats because they're no longer exempt from paying their way.
And land reform?
I think a lot of it had to do with maybe abolishing these kind of quasi-feudal relationships.
But this is the Americans forcing this? They just came in and said, this is what we're going to do?
And progressive Japanese politicians as well, right? So there was a kind of synergy there between people who wanted to get rid of this aristocratic domination of Japanese society.
And what was the advantage to the occupying forces?
To democratize Japan?
Yeah.
Well, it's a propaganda.
Just propaganda.
Why would the U.S. have any interest in propping up fascistic aristocracy that was bent on conquering all of Asia? Those people had to go. They were the people that went to war against the United States. So they were deposed and rendered as politically impotent as possible. And it's easy to do when you take over the tax function.
So our blogger, so that's our context. Our blogger mentions that the setup has some resemblance to The Cherry Orchard, which I was thinking of as I watched it.
Cool. You're much better versed.
It's been over a decade since I saw a Chekhov performance, which was a student performance. Not that that makes any difference to the plot, I hope. And much longer than that since I read the plays. However, Chekhov does not usually have quite as many sensationalistic things going on in his plays as happened in this one.
This was quite a ball.
This seemed to me a lot more like Cherry Orchard meets Written on the Wind or something like that.
Yeah, okay.
Although, this is actually possibly the craziest melodrama I've ever seen. Like, I think this surpasses even Douglas Sirk or Frank Bergegi at their wildest.
I read a comparison to The Magnificent Ambersons.
Again, The Magnificent Ambersons is a calmer movie than this.
Calmer? A lot of people go stark raving mad mad in
but
that
they
film.
don't do it in the middle of a ball.
Well, okay, sure.
Like, everybody, like, gives a performance of their madness in the middle of this ball at some point, while all the attendees just stand around staring at them. So this director, there's very little about him that I could find on the internet. Kōzaburō Yoshimura.
Prolific director.
A prolific director. Our blogger compares him to the George Stevens or William Wyler of his day, and that he doesn't seem to have had a really consistent auteur style. And
George Stevens does have a pretty consistent...
You don't need to pick fights about George
All
Stevens
right.
with this blogger. Just go with the comparison. You know what they're saying.
So did he do a lot of plays and novels? Is that it?
No, I don't know. I don't know anything more about it than that. This is just the comparison being made in that this person isn't considered an Ozu type or Mizoguchi type auteur, but was very well respected. A very well respected and prolific director, and apparently often worked with this particular screenwriter that he has for this film, Kenito Shindo. And through this blogger, we managed to find one Setsuko Hara movie that almost slipped through our net of awareness, that actually has subtitles.
Yeah.
So we'll be seeing one more by this director and presumably the same screenwriter.
Our schedule has been revised, so if you have the old one saved, check out the new one.
Yeah, we might have more to say about that at the end of the episode. Oh, well, I should just say one more thing about the cultural context, which is that the blogger does point out that despite the fact that this is obviously a post-war context, this type of family ought to be more embedded within the military. Like, the son should have enlisted, the chauffeur who has become a wealthy businessman should have been in the war too, but then how did he build up his business if he was? The father should have some kind of government position. None of this is ever mentioned.
Well, no, they do mention that. He went to France, remember? He was obviously in the diplomatic service.
Okay, well, there you go.
The father
I did not observe that.
He talks extensively about that. Remember when we went down to the port and you said goodbye to me, bidding farewell?
Yeah, I remember that discussion.
So going to France, clearly...
Oh, I didn't know what going to France meant.
Well, to me, it means official government business. Maybe the Treaty of Versailles or something like that, right?
Okay, well...
That's what made the most sense to me.
Good spotting, Dave.
Okay.
Can you answer about the son and the chauffeur? It's not mentioned in any case if they were in the war.
They could have been in the war. There's a lot we don't know about these people.
So basically the blogger's point was a lot of this is left vague, and maybe more vague in the subtitles than in the original Japanese.
Well, that's quite possible too.
Yeah, so go.
Well, we start. The family is kind of having a meeting about what to do. They're at a crossroads. They're going to lose their house.
There's a father, 2 sisters, and a brother, and Setsuko Hara is the only sensible person in this family.
Yeah.
And she definitely is, despite being in one of her father-oriented daughter roles, she is definitely the most modern person in this family as well.
Oh yeah, she is totally adjusting to the new Japan. She seems to think it's probably a good idea.
And I guess she is cool and analytical.
When she has no romantic interest in anyone.
And the father talks about how she's being very rational about this. She's following her rationality, which no one else is managing to do.
Yeah, he says, you probably can't understand this in emotional terms, even though you have grasped it rationally. Yeah.
Right. So I guess her persona is very cool.
In this one, she really is just a forward-thinking individual trying to...
keep her disgusting, decadent family from killing themselves and other people.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. And she has no real goals set for herself that we hear about or see her think about. She seems to be completely focused on everybody else.
She's just doing damage control.
Even though it is a lot, like the closeness and preoccupation that she has with her father is somewhat reminiscent of an Ozu movie. It has nothing in common with an Ozu movie beyond that, because Ozu movies are all about this struggle within her to either be allowed the space to not make any kind of decision or to make an unpopular decision. In this case, she's not making decisions. She is just helping other people.
Sure. So the backstory for everybody here is the daughter has had
an affair with the chauffeur
many years ago when he was their chauffeur.
The daughter is
12 years, I think he says.
The daughter is very bound by traditional class allegiance, and whatever she thought about the chauffeur, she never considered marrying him, and she has washed her hands of him. She doesn't want him coming over because the rumor is he's coming over. Setsuko Hara has invited him.
And she thinks he wants to gloat, well, both that he has the power to buy their home and that she got divorced from the wealthy man that she married instead of him because that man was having an affair.
Right.
So that's her opinion of this guy.
The brother is complete wastrel who doesn't give a fuck about anything anymore.
He does seem like a psychopath for most of the movie, but everybody does get, spoilers, a last-minute reform.
Kind of, yeah.
Of sorts, or regret, anyway.
Yeah, there's more to him than you initially think.
Lots of regrets for our youth.
Yeah, but here he's just basically saying, it doesn't matter what people were before the war. It's a new day, but he's not taking it in the kind of full speed ahead into democracy and modernity sense that Setsuko Hara is going. He just basically says this. He's equating it with nihilism.
Well, she talks about how they're all going to have to go to work, but that seems like as impossible as taking a big leap and landing on the moon for these people. Even her.
Well, they've never had to think about such things.
No.
I got it. We could be on Easy Street. Let's all get jobs and go to work. Sylvia Scarlett. Of course,
Right.
They don't do that. The father is pinning all of his hopes on making an arrangement with this middle-class entrepreneur that they have long-standing relations with. And the son is engaged to the businessman's daughter.
So this family is some kind of nobility. Oh,
Yeah.
The blogger was good on this as well, picking up on visual cues and saying, although that is also left vague, there is a samurai suit of armor that suggests that was the ultimate origin.
Well, yeah, if you're an aristocrat in Japan, then you were a samurai family, yes.
Right, and then the grandfather is portrayed as a general in his portrait, so they're part of the military.
He probably fought in the Russo-Japanese War, which was actually mentioned in this film. It was such a huge triumph for Japan in 1905.
Yeah, so this businessman has been using the connections and the title of his
patron.
Yeah, so there you go, of his patron, the father, in order to build his business.
But now
he's a black marketeer.
Yeah, and the war's over and everything's changed. He can shed this aristocratic dead weight. He's already got the momentum he needs. He's got the money. Not only is he not going to help them, he's not giving them any money to get out of their problems with the tax collectors. He's also revoking this marriage plan between the son and his daughter.
And he has been lending them money this whole time, too.
It's over. He's cutting them off, cold turkey. But the father doesn't know that at this time. He's really hoping that this is going to get them out of it, because it's helped them before.
The sensible daughter knows better than this, and she just wants the chauffeur, who is trustworthy, to buy the house. But the father, apparently, it is less humiliating for him to grovel.
Well, yeah, because that's a kind of tried and true arrangement, right? It's a fair exchange, and it's an exchange that goes back to feudal times, right? Like, remember the crucified lovers? That's set well back. That's several centuries before this, but already we see that arrangement. We have the nobles who are all coming to the businessman for loans, right?
Right.
So that is something aristocrats are very familiar with and comfortable with.
So, and then the other dramatic setup is that this sister wants, if they have to give everything up and sell their house, she wants to have one final ball. It seems like they haven't had a ball in quite a while. Many decades, perhaps.
The party to end all parties.
Yeah.
That's
and
the plan.
And it definitely is that. So then we check back in with them at the ball. We do find out that the son is also having an affair with
a servant.
And also treating the servant bad.
He is a bad lot.
He's a bad, yeah. I was thinking that he might be even more vile, a character even more vile than Gregory Peck in Duel in the Sun. But he is, actually, despite the fact that he reforms before death, or at least feels bad before death, he is actually worse because Gregory Peck is just a dumb, confused idiot. This guy is, like, positively gross.
He's a Dostoevskian nihilist.
Pretty much. He just doesn't have anything to do and anything to live for now that he's not going to have money.
Right. It's a conceivable character. Definitely something that can happen, I would think. So, interesting the way it all plays out. Despite his manifest villainy, it is quite interesting the way he kind of does get pushed around by his lover.
How do you mean?
She barges into the room. He's trying to play the piano. She interposes herself between him and his musical instrument. And she does and she also throttles him later. I mean...
Well deserved.
Well, I'm not saying it's not deserved, but you don't really expect that. He doesn't actually
He's very
fight her.
He's very passive. Like, from the first time we see him, he's just lying down, blowing smoke rings, waiting for the the end days.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
And he does have a sexual assault scene later, but it's kind of half-hearted, gets interrupted by a rock, and then he just stops.
That was looking pretty bad for a while there.
Oh,
though.
yeah.
That was looking pretty serious.
No, well, his intent was to get her completely blackout drunk and rape her because he can't marry her anymore and get her money.
Well, we're getting well ahead of ourselves here. Anyway, so the ball becomes this kind of competition of who can be more revolting, the aristocratic family or this black marketeer.
Yeah.
And I mean, I'm not sure who wins. It's not clear who wins or loses. They both lose and win.
Yeah, well, there's no effort made to humanize this black marketeer, though. He's just gross. So that's something to take note of. The film doesn't seem to be very interested in examining the actual moral life of the people outside of the Anjo House. They just come in to create problems.
Sure.
Because the film does show a lot of sympathy for the problem that, let's say, the father is facing. Even
the father is humanized before any of the other family members, other than Setsuko Hara. The chauffeur, I think he's treated sympathetically.
Oh yeah, no, of course. The chauffeur, yeah.
He makes a big, stinking, humiliating mess, but then that causes the daughter to repent and run after him to the ocean.
Yeah, that was quite amazing.
And we never see them again. I guess maybe they've run off together. Who knows?
Well, yeah, she runs off to follow him on the beach, and she sheds a lot of her most precious possessions.
It's almost a Morocco ending.
Yeah, her pearls drop off on the beach.
Marlene Dietrich in Morocco.
She doesn't need that anymore.
So that's their ending. It's a happy ending of sorts.
I mean, the father veers wildly all over the place. So much of it revolves around his conviction that life cannot go on if they cannot keep this house and the garden that he has loved his entire life, which that's something that people can understand, right? I mean,
well, it's not just a sentimental attachment, though. He is old, and yeah, he just can't imagine any other way of life than the one he's lived, especially since it's going to mean a come down. It's pride that makes it impossible for him to go on, not the money.
But he has insight into it as well, right? Like when he's saying goodbye to the servant, he's talking about how the servant has taken care of him since he was a boy, even though he probably didn't deserve it. Like, he doesn't feel like this is a cosmic injustice. He just feels like it's a personal tragedy to have been set up to get all the good things in life for so long, and then all of a sudden everyone says, no, you're just like a regular person.
Yeah,
you don't get that anymore.
He just doesn't have any identity outside of this.
Yeah, and he knows that he didn't deserve it to begin with, which is interesting.
Sure. There's the whole scene where he finds out that the man that he's been a patron to is not going to repay him now that it's not convenient and is withdrawing all forms of help. I thought that there was a deliberate parallel in the way he begs and pleads and cries with him at the door and gets shoved aside the way that the servant girl got shoved aside by the son.
Yeah, that's
when she was
interesting.
begging him to marry her. And that's when he nearly kills the man. He gets Chekhov's gun out for the first time. As in the cherry orchard, though, no gun is actually fired in this. Well, it's fired.
Oh, yeah.
Is it fired? Is it even fired? No, he just gets it out twice.
Yeah, you might be right. I mean, it comes very close to being used.
Yeah, twice. And then Setsuko Hara shows up in the nick of time to just shake her head and be like, no, don't commit murder, Dad. That's worse. That's worse even. Like, jail is gonna be even worse. But then she just leaves him alone with the gun again after that. And the friend, whatever you want to call him, the black marketeer, he can't leave because he can't find his daughter. And we have seen the son overhear him tell the father that he is not going to allow this marriage any longer.
Yeah, so then he goes over to his sister and says, that man's a filthy criminal, and he kind of just implies, well, I'm gonna rape this girl, the other sister.
Oh, okay, so she never even finds out.
No, and then he starts plying.
But I mean, she does give no shits afterwards when the girl basically makes it clear that she thinks this man has raped her or attempted rape.
Yeah, it's true.
There's no commentary on that from her toward her brother or anything afterwards. I did note that as an interesting facet or lack thereof of her character. Okay, so then this rape starts brewing.
Yeah.
While all this other craziness is brewing, the chauffeur has been rejected after stating that his feelings for this woman, the sister, have never changed, and he is told that he is filthy and worthless, and starts getting himself super drunk in the kitchen with the servants where he belongs, he says.
Yeah.
And then this whole rape thing starts brewing, just the way you hear about it in the #MeToo stories. He literally starts pouring alcohol down the girl's throat while she's passing out.
She can't lift the drink anymore,
And
so he does it for her.
To stop and...
Yeah, it's really vile.
Yeah.
Then when she's sufficiently unconscious, he takes her to like a greenhouse or something.
Yeah.
And starts getting
like
ready.
The greenhouse in Rules of the Game.
Yeah. Starts getting ready methodically to attack her.
I mean, that is where you're supposed to meet your lover for a tryst and have sex on an estate, but this is a terrible inverted version of that.
There's no fun being had here. Not by him either. He's not even gleeful about this evil.
He starts blowing smoke in her face just to degrade her while she's unconscious before he rapes her.
Yeah, so his nihilism extends to the point of he's just doing this because it feels like some kind of a just retribution as far as he's concerned against the fates.
Yeah, well, against the father.
Well, yeah.
In particular, that fate. Yeah, so this is very much a crime of power and not sex.
No, it's so insanely gross.
70s feminist terminology.
But then the servant girl that he has jilted throws a big rock through the windows, and that interrupts everything, and he just sort of wanders away from the scene of his crime.
But he's already accomplished what he needs to, which is to ruin her.
She doesn't know what happened.
She doesn't know what happened, and also, I mean, someone has seen them off alone together like this, and etc. So, just to make things as bad for herself as they possibly can be, she runs into the ballroom.
Well, she's got no judgment at all at this point.
She's pretty drunk, probably,
full of liquor, yeah.
So she comes running into the ballroom, covered in hay or grass from the gazebo, or the greenhouse, and throws herself sobbing at her father's feet, and pretty clear to everybody that no good has been up to.
Right. Then she confronts the son, and he just finds it all hilarious, and then she slaps him very hard in the face.
He actually becomes kind of fun at this point. He really is like a Robert Ryan-style nihilistic villain at this point.
Yeah.
He's like the spirit of nihilism, and he just laughs and goes off and starts playing melodramatic music on the piano to accompany the rest of this craziness.
Yeah, after getting hit a few times.
Oh, like a lot of times.
Yeah. But yeah, nobody else speaks to him.
No. Well, the father just stands there being very confused. The daughter, the girl's father, that is.
Now, during all of this insanity, a woman shows up who is identified by many of the upper crust partygoers as a geisha, who is not supposed to be invited to a fancy affair.
I think that upper class gray-haired woman is the sister of the father.
Yeah, exactly. So she has presumably maintained her aristocratic standing. Maybe they had more resources to handle the property taxes or whatever, but she doesn't seem to have encountered the hard times.
We know has been out of money for a long time. That's why they've been borrowing from the black marketeer.
Right, but not the sister.
Yeah.
The sister seems to still be entrenched. So she's still got all the prejudices that her class would normally have. She thinks it's disgusting. Everybody's whispering. The gossip is going around.
And even I was like, what the fuck, when Setsuko Hara just kind of pats this woman on the back and says, go help dad relax.
Yeah.
That was pretty much the translation.
The amazing reversal on all of this later in the party, not that long after this, is Setsuko Hara emerges upstairs on the balcony, makes this incredible announcement that her father has married this woman who has been identified as a geisha. There's a lot of very disapproving looking going around the room. A few claps begin, and finally everyone does get stampeded.
The brother starts clapping first.
It really does affect him that his father has legitimized his... We find out it's a 15-year relationship he's had with this woman.
Yeah.
And he's finally made it public, and presumably will be a totally different thing for her.
Well, I'd have
life.
to... I don't know if that was his son's emotion, but maybe it was. I'd have to look at the scene again, because if so, you could imagine that he might ideally like to own up to his relationship with the servant girl.
Well, obviously that's it, because he does care about the servant girl, but he's been raised to think that you can't actually follow through on that or allow it to mean anything, and that's clearly warped him and made him an awful person.
Just like Gregory Peck in Duel in the Sun.
Yeah, and just like the older sister or the other sister who had the same relationship with the chauffeur, right? They both are terrible people because they were not able to acknowledge their feelings for someone who's beneath them on the class chart.
So this cold-blooded rape kind of had to be interrupted or he would never have been able to be redeemed.
1946 terms, I guess he's probably salvageable because he didn't do it.
Dramatically, anybody is salvageable.
Yeah.
It's a movie.
Yes, but you can't really do half of a rape and then not be responsible for it just because someone throws a rock.
Well, I mean, he's standing at the brink of the abyss. He's pulled back by the rock.
Yeah, dramatically that works in this film.
So we do get a scene at some point where we can tell that he is starting to feel guilty about his whole life.
Yeah.
And he goes and throws himself in the bed, and that's when the servant girl arrives and starts throttling him.
Yeah, because he's done...
It really looks like she might kill him.
Yeah, I mean, he's
not fighting her off. I mean, he does remove her hands eventually, but initially he's not fighting her off very hard.
Stop, you're choking me.
And he's like kind of laughing.
At first, I guess, you're like, no, she's not really gonna do it. She's just letting off steam, but it did look like she was trying her best.
Yeah, she has small hands.
Yeah.
He's got a big throat, big manly throat. Then she starts crying and says that even if I killed you, I'd still love you, so it doesn't matter. Does he actually embrace her? Or anything at this
not
point?
In that scene, but later, yes.
Oh no, she keeps saying he's not human, and the way that scene ends, which is kind of interesting, is him just saying, if I'm not human, what am I then?
Yeah, no, he is.
But not sarcastically, he's actually asking this as a philosophical, what am I?
Exactly. Quite a reversal. I didn't think that they could get this kind of mileage out of this character, but they managed to do it.
Sure.
Most of the rest of the film centers on the father and Setsuko Hara.
Yeah.
He starts making everything ready for his departure, not only from the house, but from this plane of reality.
Yeah, I mean, I imagine you also figured that even though he's pretending like everything, he's going to go on with his life and everything will be okay, that he's actually going to commit suicide.
Well, yeah, he says, I've decided to accept my fate gracefully, and he means for people to think, oh yeah, okay, well, he'll just be with us for many years, living a totally different kind of life, but he means, no, I'm going to shoot myself in the head as soon as everyone leaves. He does say, it's the last thing I needed to do. Which
my last obligation was to the geisha.
Yeah.
And to own her, to give her legitimacy.
He tries to rephrase it so it doesn't sound so much like a suicide note in speech.
For some reason, everybody just ignores the obvious reference to suicide.
Yeah.
Both his loving daughter and his loving lover.
But not your two podcast hosts. We
No,
knew.
we knew. We've seen this movie. Not this exact movie, but we've seen this movie.
He has a very touching farewell with his servant. I really liked that scene. It was good.
Yeah.
Gets his gun out again and gets ready to end it all.
This is a pretty stylishly filmed sequence.
Oh yeah, it is.
Whole thing where she's wandering around calling him.
Really beautiful.
She sits down facing a mirror in one of the empty rooms.
Yep.
And then he wanders into the adjacent room and she sees him in the mirror and he doesn't see her. And then she waits a freaking long time, even though it's very obvious what he's going to do.
Well, it's not easy to know what to do, I imagine, when you see someone pointing a gun at their head.
I think that would be... Well, he's not pointing it at his head.
He's getting ready.
Yeah.
When someone has a gun, I've never actually had to worry about this.
Because we're in Canada.
If you run at them, maybe they're just gonna shoot themselves more quickly. Who knows, right?
Anyway,
but she decides she has to.
Ultimately, she does a flying tackle.
It's amazing.
Like Rosalind Russell in His Girl Friday.
Yes, I was not expecting that.
Were you expecting that the movie ends on a dance scene, sort of like...
No, it was amazing.
Like Beau Travail.
I loved it.
Yeah, averted suicide followed by dance scene, just like Beau Travail, actually.
And it brings everyone back together, and it does give you hope that these people are going to be able to adjust. They are going to be able to follow Setsuko Hara's lead and live in the new Japan of 1946 and beyond.
And the servants, what's left of them, gather around and watch father and daughter doing the tango and misty-eyed, and they just think this is the most endearing sight they've ever witnessed.
So it does have some Downton Abbey-ish aspects to it. It does take seriously the the bond that a servant would have with master, and obviously that does happen in reality sometimes. I'm always leery of it, and there's always some kind of an ideological possibility in presenting things that way.
Yeah, I'm not so concerned about real life because I'm not a servant in that situation, and I don't know what that would be like. But yeah, dramatically, it all depends on what use that's being put to.
No, in this
No,
film...
Mammy and Gone with the Wind is
No.
not one of the best examples, or is one of the best examples of that.
And nothing that happens in Downton Abbey is any good.
Couldn't get past the first episode of that shit.
This film, whatever, they're just a sympathetic audience. And so ends the tale of the Anjo House.
And it does end on the famous Setsuko Hara smile.
It sure does.
Which she's been using throughout this film in the way that it's normally employed, which is the more anguished and uncomfortable she is, the more she smiles. But at the ending here, she actually does seem to be feeling some kind of hope and joy of maybe a Stella Dallas final frame type.
It's hard to say. Yeah, she's set everyone on a better path in life. And for herself, we have no idea what her plans are.
Well, all the father has to do apparently is move in with his geisha girlfriend and just deal with the loss of masculine pride.
Exactly. She's already offered.
The sister just has to marry a wealthy ex-chauffeur.
Yeah, that's no hardship.
That's not a problem. And the brother has to find gainful employment.
And settle down with this woman who just tried to kill him.
It's like Phantom Thread.
They had some ups and downs there.
She knows how to make him settle down.
Yeah. I really liked the movie.
You did? Yeah, I liked it. I wasn't as emotionally involved as I could be. Maybe I was distracted. Because a whole lot of shit hit the fan in that movie.
I'm not going to say that I liked it as much as the Narusas or the Ozus, but I thought it was a great movie.
It was good. I actually liked the second one better, though.
Oh, the second one was incredible. Are we moving on?
Yeah.
Woman in the Typhoon Area.
Very different movie.
Yeah, so this is not the Setsuko Hara that anyone is ever talking about.
No, and there's just no information about this movie or this director at all, other than, like most Japanese studio directors, he was very prolific.
Right. Yeah, no, there's so much more to find out, and we just have to wonder if we ever will gain access to the resources we need to investigate. I mean, I guess if we learned to read Japanese, we could read a lot more monographs and articles.
That's not getting done. We can barely handle working, writing, and doing this podcast.
I know, it's a real shame, because I would like to do it.
So I'll give the director's name. I barely know anything more about him. Hideo Ôba. And I want to know, I don't even know, there's no Wikipedia entry, so I don't even know if I can find out who's who in this cast. Who is the one who plays her boyfriend?
Well, the gangster boss.
But do we even remember his name?
It says gangster boss.
Oh, Kajimi Gangster Boss. So this would be So Yamamura. He was fantastic.
Yes. They're pirates, basically, and we meet...
But modern pirates.
Yeah.
Not like Gene Kelly costume pirates.
No, this is late 40s Japan, and we meet our cast of characters engaged in a heated sea gun battle with the Coast Guard.
So it appears that So Yamamura was a very prolific actor. Oh, and he's in the Munakata Sisters.
Now we'll have to look for him next time we watch that.
Let's keep our eyes out for this actor. Like, the two of them together made it work.
What else do we need to say to set this up? Anything?
Obviously, she's become a prostitute or a fallen woman of some kind. I'm not exactly clear on her trajectory. She's some kind of orphan, but she became a nurse at some point. And
during the war, yeah.
And then she says, 3 years ago, I should have met you 3 years ago, to the handsome...
Radio operator. His name was Amano, was it?
So has she only become a prostitute after the war? Or during the war?
Well, if the movie...
How did she fall in with these pirates?
She says that it's a horrible fact of life, as she puts it, that women are most attracted to these brutish men that abuse them.
So you think she's not a prostitute necessarily, she just became a fallen woman because she met this gangster.
Yeah, well, that's...
During the war. And she has no family, she's basically an orphan.
That's the only information that we get direct from her, so I guess we have to accept it.
Alright. I I thought it was very interesting, this different persona she's exhibiting here. There was more kind of Hollywood glamour, 1940s Hollywood glamour than usual.
Oh, yeah.
To me, it seemed like an interesting kind of blend of Dietrich Crawford and Betty Davis that was also her own.
If you thought Setsuko Hara didn't have the kind of range that you associate with the greatest performers, well, you were wrong, because I wouldn't have expected her to ever attempt such a role, but it was incredible.
So her main...
And it goes really well with some of the aspects of my character in my novel as well. So
her dominant note in this movie is weariness.
Insolent care, I think, is how I would put it. She's basically telling everyone to fuck off all the time, but also desperately trying to do something to help anyone that she can.
So other than the gang boss, there is the guy who wears the sea captain's hat.
Yeah. He's the number 2 man, always looking to get one up on the boss and have sex with his
his woman.
Yeah.
And then there's the eye patch guy who's just a creep.
Yeah, he's like the third wheel. He's like the guy that would be played by Barry Fitzgerald in The Seawolf, like the cook or something like that. But he's a member of the gang. He takes part in the shooting. They've lost a guy. When we first meet them, we see a guy get shot.
A young guy.
He is expiring in the belly of the ship, and Setsuko Hara is taking care of him when we first meet her.
And the situation is that they land on this island.
Right, they run out of gas. Maybe some of the bullets perforated their tank
like
or something.
There was like a close-up of that maybe at the beginning.
Yeah, so they don't have the resources to get to a safe pirate port or wherever they were intending to go, so they have to pull up at this meteorological island station.
Yeah, where they're just doing weather reports of, for coastlines.
They're the
citizens on the coastline and ships.
They're the advance warning against typhoons, which are also absolutely crucial, right? So
this is our second violent Japanese nature Setsuko Hara melodrama.
A lot of the rest of it is a tense kind of hostage situation.
What it ultimately becomes... So they take over this, just because the gang boss has one gun.
Yeah.
They take over this whole station because these guys don't have a gun. They weren't expecting... Nobody expects pirates.
No.
They decide, so that they can't call the Coast Guard to arrest them, the gang boss makes them break the radio, even though that means they can't give out warnings about the coming typhoon.
Yeah, and there is some philosophical discussion here about...
the common good.
Which the gang boss doesn't give a fuck about, thinks it's ridiculous to even hear about this, and if you don't stop saying it, I'm going to shoot you in the arm, and he does eventually.
Just to shut you up.
Shoot this holier-than-thou radio operator who doesn't know when to quit.
But because he looks like Dr. Kildare, Setsuko Hara decides to project onto him all of her regret.
Well, maybe,
about her life.
But she just cares about anyone that's hurt anyway. She was very...
she immediately develops a raging crush on him.
Yeah, that's true, of course.
And she does try to take care of him. I think maybe the raging crush actually starts when he moves away from her. Like, she's not because she's repulsive because she's a whore, but because she's associated with these creeps who will shoot you for talking and who don't care if hundreds of people die because...
Yeah, well, it's reasonable to be unhappy with her. Can't tell the difference between her and the rest of the gang members. She seems to be on board with their program.
And she starts out wearing men's clothes. Not very Dietrich-like. Well, it is sometimes, but not these kind of men's clothes. She just looks like a
ship's mate.
A ship's mate, yeah.
Yeah, she's just one of the gang who also happens to have nursing skills and...
be gorgeous.
Right, and be fought over occasionally by these drunken idiots.
So what this turns into... So Setsuko Hara is... part of the dramatic situation is her getting a crush on this guy, telling him her life story. He barely has any dialogue.
No, he's very sullen.
Actor.
Very sullen throughout, until the end, when he finally has kind of a breakthrough.
So she does kind of force her way into his room, start telling him the story of her life, and then what would be, even in a Hollywood movie, even in an American movie, would be a very aggressive move for a female star to make. She forces a kiss on him.
Yeah, and then she says, now I've rubbed some of my dirt off on you.
Yeah.
Take that.
Yeah. And he doesn't seem to know what to think. I mean, this actor is doing sufficient amount of acting to make us feel like he's attracted to her and confused.
Yeah, well, that's the right reaction, I think.
and scared.
I mean, he hasn't seen the scenes earlier where it is evident she has a genuine sort of calling to care for people. She became a nurse for a reason, and she did seem to really care about this kid that died under her watch on the boat.
Right. Now, the other thing that starts brewing is it becomes more and more evident that the gang boss, we start to understand his motivations for being such a vile prick, which are masculinity, toxic masculinity. It's pretty much spelled out.
Yeah, well, and
He keeps talking about
male group dynamics.
Well, and also he keeps talking about the only one who succeeds or survives is the strong one, and the strong one is the one who has the gun, and...
Yeah, but that's male group dynamics.
And over again, like, what really makes this work dramatically is that even though we've been told that I guess he beats her...
That's what she says, yeah.
It's very clear in his performance that he desperately needs Kariko.
Yeah.
Like a baby. It's not subtle, but it's quite moving, because this is the only way that you gain any sympathy for this character.
It's true.
I don't think he's supposed to be primarily disgusting. Like, there's a way to do this in an American gangster crime film where that would make the character, like, more disgusting, but I was actually moved by this, and you have to be for the ending.
Yeah, it's true. He's really in a tough spot. He really does have to lord it over everyone and act tough, or else his underlings are going to overthrow him and take over the show.
Which becomes another part of the dramatic tension going on, as the captain decides that he's going to rape Setsuko Hara, and then when he gets caught in the act, he blames it on, well, her lipstick, and then tries to kind of distract the boss from his actions by saying, oh, look, she's done all of that for radio operator.
Yep, so why don't you go kill him? Leave me alone.
But then by accident, he ends up getting killed.
Well, they do have a fight.
Yeah, and it is by the roiling ocean.
But he makes some good logical arguments as they grapple, or as they are about to grapple, where he's like, you can't afford to kill me. You need me to have another gun against the Coast Guard. Think about this politically. And then
he just falls to his death.
Yeah, so that's the end of that guy. And his eye patch pal, well, it's an open question how long he is going to stay under the thumb of this increasingly hysterical gang boss. Who has no gang anymore, really. Just an eye patch guy and a nurse.
And a nurse who clearly wants to be with another man.
Yeah, and has allowed them to repair their radio.
That's true.
So...
she's not reporting accurately there.
No.
Well, because also she does actually
She believes in the common good.
Yeah, I mean, that's the reason she's fallen in love with this guy is because he represents all of this. He's handsome, and he represents all of this goodness that she would have liked to have done, but things didn't turn out that way.
We never really see her do anything that isn't good, except go along with these guys who are doing bad things. She doesn't seem to be taking part in the shooting at the Coast Guard.
No, but she recognizes that if she is the girlfriend and part of the gang of a man who will shoot somebody in the arm for fun, like, that she is complicit in that.
No, it's true. If you started doing that kind of stuff, I would be complicit if I didn't stop you.
Stop me, or at least break up with me.
Yeah, report you.
Report me to the police. Yeah, I gotta watch myself. It all brews towards this ending.
Where, again, she tackles a man with a gun at the end. This time the gun has gone off a lot and continues to go off.
Well, more than once he gets the idea that, she is interested in this radio operator, so he has to go kill him, and obviously she's not going to let this happen because she cares about this guy, and also she wants him to do his good things in the world.
Yeah, his name is Amano.
Okay.
Radio operator. Who finally gains some insight into what she's all about at the end, thankfully, and it sheds tears for her. And it's a very interesting, layered death scene here.
No, it's amazing. Eye Patch also betrays the gang boss. Obviously, we saw that coming. He's a little creep.
He's a craven toad who goes wherever the power leads.
And then Gang Boss, I don't know, I can't remember I can't remember why exactly what prompts him that he's finally going to go and finish off radio operator.
He's in a gun battle with Eye Patch. He kills him. He's about to die, and he sees Kariko in the room with Amano, and he's like, even you betrayed me.
Which is true.
That is true.
And this weird gangster Romeo and Juliet death that has, more layers than Shakespeare.
Yeah, it does. There's all kinds of absolution going on. Everyone's sort of getting a little bit of what they needed to speed them on their way to the afterlife.
So as she fights with him to stop him from killing Amano...
Yeah, and she says, says, don't do any more evil as you're dying. Just stop, for God's sake.
And earlier when he was trying to get some kind of succor out of her, she just kept saying, you've done evil, just deal with it like a man now. Don't expect me to tell you otherwise. This is how your life's going to end.
Yeah. You made your bed, so sleep in it now.
Basically.
Yeah.
And so then she's struggling with him, trying to get him to not kill this guy, but also trying to get him to not end his life this way, because he's dying.
Yeah.
And
she gets shot.
He says her name over and over and over again, and I think she gives him, like, some little bit of comfort.
Yeah, she does.
As he's dying.
But then he's dead, and Amano comes over, and he sees everything about her at this point. He sees the whole picture and cries for her. And this is important to her.
This is what she needed.
But she does turn away from him and nestle up with her boyfriend.
Well, it's kind of like once she's gotten the approval that she needed out of this guy, then she can stand to have some insight into this jackass.
She's in love with two people at the same time as she dies there. And she gets different things from each of them.
Well, earlier she had said, I can't be in love with two people.
Yeah, but it seems like she can.
She does say something like, he's just like a boy or like a baby, and call him a little idiot or something.
Yeah.
Just before she expires. She just says to him, you're so stupid, and then...
Yeah, she says, I feel really sorry for you, for the gang boss. He's dead, so he doesn't hear that. He wouldn't want to hear that anyway. But everyone else now knows exactly what it is about him that called out to her. It's his, and I think this is probably true most of the time, someone who is placed in this position of trying to stay at the top of a organizational chart of this kind is doing things every day that they don't really want to do. They just feel like they absolutely have to in order to keep their place. And it's just sad all around. Sad for people who care about them to watch them do it.
And so all of this is handled, that we're discussing, in a very unheavy-handed way, despite how it sounds, and accomplished entirely through the atmospherics of the coming storm that they are literally right in the center of.
Yeah, there's wildly whipping wind sounds. Obviously, the shack that they were holed up in gets destroyed. It has some of the feeling of the petrified forest, maybe.
Yeah, I thought of that a bit, yeah.
Key Largo.
Key Largo was mentioned by...
Oh, really?
The blogger? Or maybe somebody in an online review.
It's the same year as Key Largo, so I don't know if there's any influence, but...
I saw someone online mention that... maybe it was IMDb. Someone in a review mentioning that she was kind of like Claire Trevor's character in Key Largo.
Really? Okay.
You don't agree? I don't know that movie well.
A little bit. I think she's maybe even more interesting. I like Claire Trevor in that movie, for sure, but this was a little bit... I don't know. This was not what I was expecting.
And yeah, so it's accomplished through those atmospherics and through these two very effective main performances, which are practically the only performances that count.
Sure. I mean, Amano works perfectly for what he's supposed to be, which is more of a symbol than anything else.
Yeah, like I said, he barely has any lines of dialogue.
And the lascivious second-in-command guy was good.
No, both of them are very effective in their minor...
The lackeys.
Minor roles.
Lackeys who are going to turn on you at any moment.
Great little movie.
Looking forward to more.
Fortunately, we did plan out all the Setsukos and much more today, because this is our romantic, what do you want to call it, relationship anniversary.
Yes, 7 years.
7 years.
Podcasting for 5 and together for 7.
We decided to spend a good chunk of it because we're,
quarantined
like everyone else, in self-isolation together, and we decided to spend a good chunk of it planning out our podcast.
Since we probably can't go to movies like regular people for a couple years yet.
An enormous amount of these Setsuko Hara movies, like she made something like 70 films, and ones that we've been able to find that have English subtitles, maybe 20. Despite the fact that she retired early, she made an enormous number of movies.
I don't know, 20 is going to be a good sampler. We've already spread the net far wider than we had before we began this project, so I'm quite pleased with it. But
so in terms of talking about her persona, it'll be more like the Jimmy Stewart retrospective episode we did, where we're taking a sample of the movies that are supposed to be the best, right? Rather than a few little odds and ends, but very few, unfortunately, in this case. Because it would be interesting. We're not going to get many more movies like this.
No, I don't think
like
so.
really unknown movies. Who knows why this is available with subtitles? Like, why did that happen?
Maybe someone stumbled across it and was like, this is totally different for one of the great icons of Japanese cinema. We gotta somehow make this possible for others to see it.
Well, whoever you are, thank you. It was very good.
Thank you very much.
Speaking of anniversary, we did some anniversary viewing. We chose a couple of movies riffing on the theme of
isolation and romance.
Love and isolation.
We watched The Enchanted Cottage, 1945, directed by John Cromwell, and Lost Horizon, 1937, Frank Capra's monumental Shangri-La film.
Yeah, I've only seen Lost Horizon once before. Not really... Well, these are both fantasy movies, but fantasy with a sort of...
psychological turn.
Well, no, but I'm talking about Lost Horizon here. I don't know if you want to call it political, like some kind of commentary on the utopian fantasy. Utopian fantasy is not my favorite genre.
Well, sure, but...
It's not, because the thing I like about fantasy is that it deals in the irrational.
Okay. It's not one of my favorite Capra films, for sure, but...
I mean, it was interesting to watch. I'm just saying it wasn't one of my favorite genres.
No, it is actually more of a utopia in the Thomas More sense, right? Like, so it's a small part of the world where they've set up a system that they're hoping somehow will spread.
Yeah, a very benevolent form of European colonization.
Got a lot of problems.
As we, of course, know, it's not actually possible to do that benevolently now. We do understand that.
Yes, we do. James Hilton, the author of the novel, may not have quite had a grasp on that. But yes, it's a kind of syncretism that's developed in Tibet between...
a weird form of Catholicism.
Doesn't seem to have anything left over of actual
Jesuit,
Catholicism.
Maybe? I don't know.
And I guess
doesn't
Buddhist
seem to have anything
beliefs.
left of Tibetan Buddhism either, really, other than traditional garbs.
It's its own thing. And it does seem to be a pretty nice little society they've got there. But more important, I think, is what it's saying about the rest of the world. And Capra's despair is palpable in this film, as they are on the verge of a massive conflagration. China was already embroiled in a war with Japan, as we know from our Setsuko Hara episodes. There is some very interesting commentary in this film that you don't often get from Hollywood movies of this era, right? Where they have this dramatic rescue from a Chinese town that's under attack.
They have to evacuate 90 white people.
Yeah, and they keep emphasizing that, and you think, watching it in 2020...
The movie is going to be okay with that.
Yeah, that they're not aware of how fucked up what they're saying is. And they're so insistent about it that you're like, man, people really were sick and not thinking about anything. They were.
That's true.
Yeah, but Frank Capra is thinking about the full...
Robert Riskin.
Yeah, about the full import of this. And this presumably is in the Hilton novel. It feels like it must be, but I don't know. I haven't read it. I've only read Random Harvest of Hilton's
And there are
novels.
some very interesting resonances between this and Random Harvest.
I love Random Harvest.
In the little glimpse of romance that we get in Shangri-La.
As they get into the air and get away from that conflagration, our hero, Ronald Colman, who is one of my favorite actors.
And who
he's
is also
so good.
in Random Harvest.
Yeah, he explains. He's
really likable.
Yeah, and very insightful and very woke in a lot of ways. Although his function as a government operative, and he is in line to become the actual top-ranking diplomat in Britain, the foreign secretary, he has to ignore all of his insights and feelings and just operate in a Machiavellian fashion to promote Britain's good.
Which he says.
Exactly.
He says,
but
I'm not brave enough to do the things I really want, live according to my ideals.
Yeah, which would be not to abandon the thousands of Chinese citizens who are going to be killed in this situation down there that they've escaped by the grace of their European privilege. That's a great beginning for the film because it's a real reversal. My biggest problem with the whole movie is the brother.
That's your problem with
He's
it? I think
awful.
It's interesting.
John Hall, it's not his fault.
Well,
it's the way he's written. It's just so worthless and it just creates...
I don't know, I kind of like the idea that there is just this one character who just arbitrarily hates paradise.
Yeah, but it's stupid. There's nothing grounding it except that he's a shrieking infant. They had to give him a little bit more.
I also didn't understand the motivation of the woman who lies
No.
in order to leave. Like, it's incomprehensible.
No.
She's just purely a device.
She's Eve, leading them out of the Garden of Eden for no reason, just perversely, right? It's a real
And she basically
fault.
accuses everybody of rape on her way out.
Yeah, terrible fault with the movie because she is...
Well, the whole movie's not great on gender, although it does have a fun little role for...
Jane Wyatt.
Jane Wyatt, and Dave thinks that, although we have not been able to find any evidence of this on the internet, Dave's theory is that this movie is the basis for the original Star Trek series.
Well, so much of the aesthetics of it definitely feel like they're looking forward to some of the Star Trek visuals that we get. Also to Forbidden Planet. And we know Forbidden Planet was a massive influence on Star Trek, so maybe all of the influence is going through the conduit of Forbidden Planet, I can't say. But the hiring of Jane Wyatt...
Yeah, the one piece of circumstantial evidence is Jane Wyatt playing Spock's mother.
Amanda Grayson.
The human mother.
So yeah, Jane Wyatt, I thought she was great in this movie.
But of course, as we were discussing off mic, it does have a kind of opposite take on this utopia from the one that original series Star Trek would probably take.
Well, see, that's my problem. Like, if you wanted to have someone create dramatic conflict, make the brother someone as substantial as Captain James T. Kirk, who would have demanded that they leave and maybe destroy the whole valley because it's too easy for them to live there. But he would have done it in a more persuasive...
No, it is for humanity to struggle and be noble and try to improve ourselves constantly, and our restlessness is what constitutes our humanity, Spock.
No, I really think that that would have made it probably a 5-star movie.
The whole movie would have been like a big philosophical dialogue.
Yeah.
Between Ronald Colman and Captain Kirk.
Yeah, I would have liked that.
And William Shatner.
I would have liked that better. A great movie. I mean, incredible visuals. You can't go wrong seeing it if you've never seen it before.
And it feels like Frank Capra needed to do it. It's not by any means. It's just one of those things where it's not going to be your best work, but it's something you need to get out of your system.
You know Frank Capra's story in the 30s, right?
Well,
From
we're going to talk
the name
about this
above
more
the title.
when we do Elizabeth Kendall, because she gets very upset with him for deciding
His
that
messianic turn.
That God, after he has such a success with It Happened One Night, God has told him that he must create important movies, and she thinks that this is a diminishment of his art. But I would say yes and no.
Yeah,
it
I
giveth
agree.
and it taketh away, and ultimately it becomes like the pinnacle of his art when he can kind of blend it all together again in It's a Wonderful Life after going through all of this.
Thesis, antithesis, synthesis going on. It's a dialectical process for Frank Capra, for sure, and this is definitely on the pie-eyed. This, I guess you could, but again, it's Capricorn, but it shows thousands of people getting mowed down by machine guns.
No, I don't think the problem with it is that it's Capricorn. The problem with it is that it is potentially white elephant art.
Okay, yeah. Bad brother role.
Yeah, any of the characters who want to operate against this utopia don't make any sense.
Isabel Jewell, I thought, was wonderful in this movie. She always is. She has a great little role in Tale of Two Cities, which we're going to see.
Well, this movie also, a problem I do have with this movie is that it's funny that we watched it as romantic isolation. I mean, Ronald Colman himself is having a romance with himself in this movie, or with Shangri-La itself, or something, in isolation. He immediately becomes very calmed down as soon as he's removed from civilization. He gets the vibe of this place.
Oh, he really likes finding out that they've been hijacked. He's like, well, at least I don't have to go back to be foreign secretary. Let's just relax up here.
I mean, the resemblance to Random Harvest is in the fact that they're both stories about a person with a lot of worldly success who is very, very ensconced in the upper class of his society, who doesn't want any of that, who wants to find a kind of
Cottage with Greer Garson.
Cottage inside of themselves with the woman who would, suit that cottage. That's what all they really want out of life, but they don't exactly know, particularly in Random Harvest, which is one reason it's more dramatically interesting.
No, it's a much better movie,
better movie, is that they don't exactly know how to find their way into that inner space. That could also be a social transformation.
Yeah.
And then the Enchanted Cottage.
Wow.
I mean, we said that we wanted to do Dorothy McGuire eventually, but it's going to be a few years from now. We've got quite a list of actresses, and I'm trying to sneak some actors into the... Dave is very resistant, but I'm trying to sneak some actors.
I love actresses.
Actors into some honorary actresses, maybe?
We'll talk about that shortly. We're not doing a full discussion of Enchanted Cottage here, but we can say a few
Well,
words.
I mean, you can't actually say any words about it without giving the entire movie away.
That's true, but what a great movie. I like it more every time I see it.
And you pointed out to me that the screenwriter also did the odd little wonderful fantasy.
He wrote Cat People, Curse of the Cat People, and Seventh Victim, all the Luton movies, some of the best ones.
Yeah, Seventh Victim is your very favorite. Curse of the Cat People might be my favorite.
Well, those are both right at the top for me, yeah. He also wrote I Remember Mama and some dialogue for Miracle of the Bells, which I find to be quite a delightful film.
And also, oddly enough, given last week's episode, he did the screenplay for Billy Budd. Maybe we should give that movie another look.
Maybe, but again...
It's not a fantasy, though.
When you're adapting from a novel or a novella, maybe you just keep everything that's right in the novella. I don't remember how the screenplay worked in that film, but yeah, we kind of dissed it last week.
Well, yeah, based on very distant memories.
Yeah, but what a tremendous film, a great pairing or re-teaming of Robert Young and Dorothy
it's a movie
Maguire.
that, I mean, you can also talk about it teaming with atmosphere, which it very much needs for its premise. It's a very slight premise, but it has to be pulled off by the atmosphere and the performers, including Herbert Marshall.
Herbert Marshall is indispensable to this film and to many films. I really like him in all of his phases, but in the mid-40s when he's doing...
Betty Davis's Flipping Boy, you like that phase?
Sure, he's good in those as well. But in the mid-40s, he really moved into an interesting...
character roles?
Yeah, you know, like in Razor's Edge, where he's Somerset Maugham and playing his little mind games with Gene Tierney. That's incredible. And here, he is just such a benign and understanding force, and you really believe it, and it doesn't feel trite at all.
No, it's a very charming little movie.
Love it.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to have to fully discuss it when we do Dorothy Maguire. But in the meantime, just watch it.
Yeah, this is an essential
you were
film
saying...
to understanding the greatness of Dorothy Maguire, I think.
Yeah, it's kind of like that, what did Selznick call it about her pixie quality kind of extends, like Jennifer Jones in Portrait of Jenny, not that it's as great a movie, but her pixie quality kind of extends to enchant the entire movie.
Yeah.
And she really is the focal point of it.
But Robert Young...
He's great.
Yeah, it wouldn't be
and,
the same with anyone else.
They were an important pairing.
Yeah, Claudia and David.
That's the movie that brought her to
the
Hollywood,
screen.
the screen, because she appeared in the stage play, and so she became an important screen couple with Robert Young.
So look for her a couple of years down the road. We'll be going through all of her films.
I guess I'll just say one thing that I've been thinking about with regard to this movie for a while now that shouldn't give it away. For those who haven't seen it, is that for me it's the perfect movie for the Instagram era, because it's about the problem of looking at what you have through your own eyes versus looking at what you have through
the panopticon.
Yeah, panopticon representing kind of the most conventional point of view that you could take on a person's life.
What a terrible thing to imagine. Spring Byington looking over your Instagram photos and thinking
just saying,
disapprovingly.
You poor thing.
7th anniversary, you poor losers. Also, very great in this film is Mildred Natwick. I don't think she gets nearly enough credit. She's not in a lot of movies, but she's always... 1945 must have been her best year in films, because she did this and Yolanda in The Thief.
Her role in this movie is unexplained in a good way.
It really is amazing.
Alright, so then we just want to talk about upcoming features.
Yeah, so planned out all of our series up until February 2022, at which point we're hoping that we'll be able to emerge from our basement abode and actually go to a lot more screenings at the TIFF Bell Lightbox again. But until then, we're not going to let it get us down. There's
too much to do.
We've got everything scheduled for our Hollywood studios year by year, all the way up until 1938 films. And we've got our Oeuvre-View series planned through Setsuko Hara,
Clara
Bow,
Margaret Sullivan.
Several Clara Bow films are sadly lost, but we do have a good...
about 2/3.
Margaret Sullivan, we're going to be going through all of hers.
16 films.
And then we're going into...
Well, suddenly I got an absolutely irresistible hankering that I don't know where it came from, but this is how I like to plan what we're going to do from my end, which is to go by whims. If the whim is strong enough, I will plan it. And I decided that we absolutely had to sneak an actor into our series because he just fit the criteria as set by Jennifer Jones and is also pretty much ideally represented by Margaret Sullivan. Like what we said when we were doing Jennifer Jones, who was the template for this series, is an actor who made a limited number of films of high quality, was very selective. All of the films are going to be probably interesting, and the actor is pretty much guaranteed to be interesting in them.
Yes, and has a large defining role in what the film is like.
And is ideally, and this actually goes for a lot of the other actresses that we're going to be looking at, ideally has a kind of unique quality that they communicate on the screen, probably was quite eccentric in real life, and communicates that in their performances, in their on-screen presence as well. So I decided we had to do Daniel Day-Lewis.
Yes, so by February 2022, we will be in the early stages of our overview, or Oeuvre-View, of Daniel Day-Lewis's films.
But I'm going to sneak in special subject. Just as a taster.
And after that, it's Jean Arthur. After that,
there's going to be much more.
We've got a lot of other plans,
we've talked about Dorothy McGuire, we've talked about Teresa Wright. And so on and so on.
Each month, there will also be a special subject. If it's in October, it'll be a Halloween. If it's in December, it'll be a Christmas. If it's in February, it'll be a Valentine's. Other than that, they're kind of free-floating. It's all going to be planned out.
And I've already planned out Ritwik Attack.
Yeah.
Partition Trilogy. I've got that planned. We were going to do a back-to-school feature in the fall, but I don't know if anyone's going back to school. But anyway, it will be a back-to-school nostalgia feature, which is Amy Heckerling's Loser and Whit Stillman's Damsels in Distress, which I consider the only perfect movie ever made. But I've only seen it once, so we'll see if it lives up to my memories.
We'll see, yes. There's a lot of great stuff coming up. Hopefully you'll check it out. As always, if you see our list and something strikes your eye, but you don't know how to see it, definitely get in touch with us. We should be able to steer you in the right direction.
Still no letters.
No letters lately, no, and we do...
We're like Margaret Sullivan. We reach into the mailbox, we reach our gloved hand feels around in the empty space, and our little sad, forlorn, waif faces look into it, and, and then we go to bed and we can't work.
Send us some letters so we can open them up.
Dear friend. And just talk about movies with us.
Theirbuggy@gmail.com.
Wait, no, didn't you say that got bombarded by spam because our mailbox is so empty?
We did get some spam.
Can we even use that mailbox?
Of course we can.
Okay.
But we're getting some stuff from fake banks.
And fake women?
Oh, I think so, yeah, but mostly fake banks.
Okay.
Coming up immediately on the schedule next week is Fox Film Corporation 1932. We're going to be watching Me and My Gal, directed by Raoul Walsh. It's a personal favorite of mine with Spencer Tracy and Joan Bennett.
Okay.
The blonde Joan Bennett before she went dark-haired for noir. After Tomorrow, a Frank Borzage film. So I'm looking forward to those.
You've seen all the Borzaghis? Well, I don't think either of these films, so that sounds great.
See you soon.